So this session basically is going to talk about the new AJAX library and what are the new jQuery features and the AJAX Control Toolkit and how we will blend all this together. So we will have a lot of demos and a lot of code snippets to explain the concepts. So let us start off. So let me start with a brief history of what are the different types of web applications we have been developing. Like let's talk about the .NET 1.1 or the 1.0 or the 1.1. That was pure server-side programming where all the code and the controls were created on the server and the HTML was pushed on. And whenever an event happened, your page used to post back. So then came the concept of AJA applications or the AJAX-based applications during the .NET 2.0 time frame. Here we had the partial page updates and the async calls happened, but still most of your page content used to re-render. So what we are going to talk today is the client-side AJAX application where most of your code and events are on the browser. Everything, all the work gets done on the browser and only the JSON data will move back and forth between the client and the server. So we get very good performance and responsiveness using this new client-side AJAX technology. So this is the client-side application model where the page just renders once and you have AJAX calls or the asynchronous calls happening behind the screens updating your page with just the JSON data. So why do we generally say AJAX applications are good? The AJAX applications are good because we have less round trip to the server. If you are contacting the server less often means that you have more responsiveness, less bandwidth problem, and you give a good user experience to your user. So this is the server-side ASP.NET with no AJAX which I was talking, that is during the .NET 1.0 or the 1.1 time frame, where all your work used to be done on the server. The controls created were your pure server-side controls. All your events were on the server-side events and all your work was done on the server. And once the HTML was pushed, it was pushed onto your browser and your browser was just determining the dumb HTML. So the problem was with this whenever a post back happens, the user has to wait for your complete screen to post back and repaint. Imagine a scenario where you have lot of data coming from the server, then your user has to just wait for the data to post back or repaint your screen. So this was a very bad user experience, and but we really didn't have a workaround for this until the AJAX came into picture. The benefits of using the server-side ASP.NET technologies were it was safe because you had very little browser compatibility issues because since most of your work was done on the server, and you could use any of your .NET programming language, be it the VB.NET or the C#. The drawbacks, as I told you, were the responsiveness, which was the main drawback because the user must wait for the complete page to post back. And the performance was less because the page content must be re-rendered for each interaction. So then during the .NET 2.0 or during the 2005 time frame came the concept of AJA applications or what we call our favorite update panel. We all thought, yeah, we have achieved it. Now we can get good responsiveness. The advantage of using update panel was you could surround any small portion of your page, only that portion of the page which wanted change or which wanted to be selectively updated within the update panel, and you could set up certain triggers on those update panels such that the triggering action could change only that region of your page. If you had a big page with lot of work happening and you wanted only a small portion of your page to be changed by partial page updation, then update panel was it. So we all thought, yeah, we have achieved it. It's a revolution that we found update panel. Here also, but still the main concept behind the screen was there was still the work happening on the server. Though there was partial page rendering and the asynchronous AJAX calls happening behind the screen, the main concept was still your table tr and td tags was formed on the server and pushed on to your browser. And the other problem here was the view state problem. Since it had to give you the partial page updation kind of look, it used to bring back all the view state between the client and the server and synchronize this view state between client and server. So it maintained a huge chunk of view state, and that became a performance issue when using UpdatePanel. So, but there was really a no workaround because we had the Microsoft AJAX library released in 2005, but it involved a lot of programming to do. If you are using the UpdatePanel, we didn't have to take care of the JavaScript. But the same feature of UpdatePanel, if I had to achieve using a JavaScript, imagine the amount of coding that I had to do. It was so much coding that we had to do using the AJAX libraries. So people really didn't bother doing that, and they continued using the UpdatePanel. Now we have this client-side AJAX library where all the work is done on the browser, all the code that is created as pure client-side code, and all the work gets done on the browser. I'll show you in my demos that we don't have any server-side concept at all. The only server-side interaction is for the data that comes from the database, and that data also comes as JSON calls. So your JSON data will only be interacting with your browser, and none of your page formation or any event interaction happens on the server side. So it's pure client side. So we have achieved a good responsiveness and performance using this new client-side ASP.NET AJAX. So the benefits, as I told you, is the responsiveness. Since events happen the moment you click it. For example, if you have two developers, one you think about a pure server-side web form developer and then a JavaScript developer. If you ask the server-side web form, if you ask both of them a common question, when does a button click event happen? The server-side developer will tell the button click event happens on the server the moment I click it, with the event firing on the server side. But for a JavaScript developer, the click event happens the moment he clicks it. That is the kind of interaction that we want to give to the users. This can be achieved by using the new client-side AJAX features. The performance is very good because, as I told you, only the data, the JSON data will be moving back and forth between the client and the server. There is clean separation of content and behavior. I'll show you in my demo that we'll have a concept called templates, which is mainly creating your UI, and then you have JSON data, which is the data coming from your server. So you have separation of UI and behavior. It is technology independent. I'm not talking about pure server-side ASP.NET at all. It's completely technology independent. It can work with any browser, be it the IE, the Firefox, Safari. Then it can work with any data, basically, which returns JSON data back. That is one criteria that we have for this client-side AJAX. Your background technology must return the JSON data for you. Then it can, in all my demos, I'll just be using either pure ASPX with no code behind, or just HTML pages with the Microsoft AJAX library. So there's one drawback though, that for example, in your server-side application, you have a drop-down list and you select a particular category and you get all the values based on that particular category drop-down. Then you change that drop-down entry to something else, and once you click on the back button, your screen will go to, your page will go to the previous selection that you did of the drop-down list. But now I'm talking about client-side AJAX, where the page is just rendered once and there is no server-side interaction at all. So this state information maintaining is not there. So what we have to do is to work around this drawback. What we can do is, during the .NET 3.5 SP1, we had the Microsoft AJAX browser history improvements, using which we could use a had history point by saving a certain state information which you could always go back to that state information whenever you want. That is one drawback which you can overcome using this. Why do we tell templates about this new client-side AJAX templates are good? This is a bad way of doing it. Sometime in life when we started off as developers, we might have done it. This is just a string of HTML and I'm getting a div and I'm setting the inner HTML to the string. What are the drawbacks? There could be some case sensitivity issues, there could be some spelling mistakes. Basically this is, and you're clubbing together your UI format, your UI as well as your data, because you are creating a UI and in the same time you are attaching your column names or you're looping through your data at the same place. So there is no separation between your UI and behavior in this particular example. So now we can use templates instead of this. So what I have here is a table body with a class called sysTemplate. And what we have, those TDs are the column names. You will see throughout in my samples this double curly braces. The items coming within this double curly braces is called a template and it represents the current data item. You can put any JavaScript code within this double curly braces. So what we have here is a data view called movie view. This data view is created on a particular table, that is on a particular DOM element. You're getting the JSON data from background and setting it on the data view. The data view is in turn attached to a DOM element, in our case the movie body. And so whenever the data view is populated with the JSON data, it populates your table body and in this way your values will be represented. So what is the good thing about this? I don't have any binding logic put in this place. This is just my UI. My HTML designer can also do this. I did not have a developer to do this. So what we are achieving here is the designer and the developer collaboration. The designer can work on the UI and then the developer can just work on the background JSON, because here template can be done by a HTML designer as well. So this is the template logic and this is used using client-side AJAX. Yeah. 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 JSON data is basically a JSON data which is coming back. Yeah, it's a built-in function. So you'll see more of this in my demo. So as I told you, it basically works with any data source which returns JSON data back. So we have this huge list of data sources which will return JSON data. We have the WCF data services, the ASMX web service, WCF web services. So this is a huge list of various data sources that can return JSON data to us. This ASP.NET AJAX client controls that I am calling can be instantiated in many ways. Now the present version of AJAX library doesn't have this imperative way of or using JavaScript way of creating client controls. Now we basically have three types. One is the using jQuery. As you see, I have added a reference to the latest jQuery, that is 1.4.1.js. That is the latest jQuery release that we have. Then what I am doing is I have a sysrequire and I am using the watermark functionality from that jQuery, from that script file, and I have a text box which is called input1 and I am adding this watermark behavior to the text box. This is one way of creating client control, where you are adding your plugin onto your input text box. Then another way that I'll show you next is if you do not want to write even a single line of JavaScript, that is possible by using a declarative approach of creating controls. You saw one declarative approach in my previous slide. I'll show that also in code. And the last approach of creating controls is like, okay, I don't want any of your client side. I'm happy with my server side programming. Then download the latest AJAX Control Toolkit. Everything is still available. Then all your controls will be present in your toolbox. Use it similar to your server side controls. Drag from the toolbox. Then you will have the same behavior as your present server side controls. So these are the three ways of creating controls using AJAX. So using the declarative approach, you have to specify few namespaces and define few attributes on these namespaces. So let me show a code snippet of that. People at the back can see this. So what I have done is I have downloaded the latest Microsoft AJAX library, and I have included a reference to various files. So the latest Microsoft library, what has happened is it's all split up into various functionalities. So you do not have one script file that you can attach. If you want certain behavior specific to your code, you can pull in only that specific JavaScript file that you want. So I have included some of the script files that is necessary for my code here. And we will see one functionality where I am calling a particular web service. So here it's again the table tbody that I defined. And what I am doing here is I am contacting a particular web service called shoppingservice.asmx, and that is, once I contact that service, in fetch operation I have which is the web method that I need to call on that service, and what is the parameter that we need to supply to that web method. It's to get all your shopping categories basically. So get all the products based on a particular category. Here I am specifying for category ID 1, get me all the products for that particular category. So here everything is done declaratively. Imagine that you have a grid view in your normal programming. So you have to make a call to your web service, write a web method. You will have a web method that needs to be called to get your data. Once the data is coming, you have to take care of your binding logic. So all these three steps is minimized here in a single step by which I have a template defined for me. By template, I mean the items within the double curly braces, that is the placeholder where your data from your database should be displayed. So I have a template here to get the product data from my web service, contacting a particular web method, and this is the place where the data should sit for me. So it's a table of product data that I'll get. So this is a declarative approach of using templates and data view. So the concept is, first your JSON data will be populating your data view. The data view is in turn bound to your table body. So once the data view is populated, it's like populating your table body. So let me go back to the slides. We'll come back to the demos later. So some of the additional other ASP.NET AJAX features is the AJAX script loader, command bubbling, live binding, saving and updating data, and conditional rendering. So I already gave you a brief about that Microsoft AJAX scripts are all now split into various scripts that you can attach, or you can use certain behaviors that you want in your file. And you need not do or need not pull in all these JavaScript files at once. For example, if you have a big div with various inner divs, and somewhere within an inner div or panel you want a particular script file, then you can do this lazy loading concept where you can include this sysrequire method just before the place where it is used, where your script file or your JavaScript file will be pulled in only at that particular instance. So we have the script loader, which basically, even if you want to define or pull in all your scripts at the page load also, it's possible. where using the sys requires and the sys on ready attribute you can use this. You can pull in all the scripts files you want. Then you can define the functionality that you want to call on page load. So this on-demand scripting or on-demand pulling of script files is new in this ASP.NET AJAX. So command bubbling, we all know command bubbling because most of us would have worked with the master detail grid scenario. You click on a particular row in your master grid and your details information is populated in your details view. This is the information that we'll have, and I'll show you in my next demo how we can achieve this. So here basically it uses certain attributes like sys command, which will tell you the kind of operation that you want to do on a master grid. We had this insert edit grids. Similarly, you can define certain commands like, do you want to do only select operation on your master grid, or do you want to act your master grid, should it insert data, should it act as a edit data template? So all this can be defined using your sys command, and you can define certain command targets and on command on particular selection of a particular row, which is the functionality that you want to achieve. All this can be done using command bubbling. Then we have this very good feature of AJAX called live binding. So there are three various ways of live binding. One way, one-time binding where the value is updated only during page load. Then you have a one-way live binding, that is if the underlying data item is updated, then the rendered data value is updated automatically. Then we have a two-way live binding. Imagine a scenario, you have a certain value coming from your database, and that value is represented in various places in your screen. And you go ahead and change that value in one place. Imagine a kind like you have a text box and you go and change that value in the text box, and that value is referred in various other places on the screen. So you need not take care of updating the value in all those places on the screen. It will be automatically updated using this new live binding concept. So basically, if the data source which is binding your data on the screen is updated, then all the places on the screen where the value is referred to is updated automatically. This is the concept of the two-way live binding that we have. So here, instead of your template concept that I had, where you specify double curly braces for the data item, you are specifying a single curly braces with the binding keyword. If most of you have used the WPF, then it will sound familiar to you, because in WPF also we are using this binding keyword for doing the binding. So here you have this two-way live binding achieved by using this binding keyword. Then conditional rendering. How many of us have found a scenario like you want to bind certain data onto your grid, then you want to achieve certain functionality, say, I want to add certain logic whether I want to display the grid or not. Or the most common scenario I'll tell you is like, for even rows in the grid I want a particular logic to happen, for odd rows in the grid I want a particular logic to happen. So that kind of conditional rendering, that is getting the ID or the index of the row and checking what is the index and doing certain functionality. Like after the particular row is bound to the grid, certain functionality can be achieved, and before you bind that row, so at each row level you are given that control to you, that is before the grid is bound or before the row is bound, you can achieve certain functionality declaratively, and after the row is bound, certain functionality can be achieved. So I'll explain this last concept called data context, and then we'll see a demo. So what is this data context class? So till now I was explaining to you concepts where we are just displaying or getting the data. But that is not it, right? We have to do the CRUD operation, that is create, read, update or delete operation. So if you have used link to SQL or ADO.NET Entity Data Model, you know that we have this context of data context, where you can make changes to data represented within this data context, and at one shot you can persist those changes and save at one shot to your database. So your server-side context of or server-side concepts of data context is now there in your client-side AJAX client-side. Then here also you will have a data context class where you can make changes to your rows, and at one shot you can save all these changes to the database. So let us break for a minute and I'll show you a demo. I'll come to the actual demo based on. Today mainly the demo would be on the shopping website that we have created. And here I have a scenario where I want to do certain my product list. I want to define certain products, or I am interested in few of the products. So just you saw that how quickly I could contact my web service and get the product information. Here I am interested in few of the products, and that's why those products are depicted in a certain color. So I am based upon a particular category, I am getting all this product listing. So let us go behind the screen and see how this coding is done. Before this, let me show you this good concept of live binding. So here I have a particular product, and you see that the product name is displayed in the master grid. The product name is coming in the legend, then the product name is coming in the text box for me. So if I make some changes to the product name, or I've made some changes to the product name, and then if I go to some other grid, so you see that the changes happened in 3 places. So this is the concept of live binding. The change is changed in the master grid, it's changed in the legend, and it's changed in the text box. So wherever the underlying data, if one place the data source is changed, all the places where the particular data item is referred to is changed by using this new live binding concept. So what you see here is certain rows being colored in a certain color is the conditional rendering concept that I explained. So we'll see the code which is used to achieve this. So it's basically the same declarative approach that we used. So again I have my template defined and my data provider being set to the web service that it needs to contact, the web method that it needs to call, and the fetch parameters. So here one important concept that you should see is so one important class here is the selected item class. So if a particular row is selected and you want to, in the master grid when a row is selected, you want to paint it in a certain color, then you can specify the CSS class that is used to paint that row in a certain color. Then what is the functionality that I am achieving? I just want a select kind of functionality. I don't want insert or edit grid to be displayed to me. So my sys command is set to select. Then they have certain functionality called sys code after. So this is the conditional rendering that I told you about. So here my sys code after, what it is doing is it's getting the current data item which is depicted by $data item, and it's getting the product name from this. So basically the data item will have all the attributes of the product like the product ID, product name, or the other things. So based upon the, give me a minute, screen just froze. So based upon the data item, what it was doing is finding out the substring and finding the getting the first index of the or the first character from the product name, and if the character starts with C, or if C is the static name of the product, then I want to color the row in a certain color. I'm saying like $element style.color equals orange. So you could see in my product listing that wherever the product name started with C, it had a color of orange. So this is the kind of conditional rendering that we are achieving. Then what happens is like you have this binding keyword where and these are the items which have binding keyword are the items which should have live binding achieved on them. So this is my master grid. Down below I have a details grid, and my details grid, the source for my details grid is my master grid. So I'm saying the source is product body, and the binding is the selected data. So once you select on a particular row in your master grid, that row information is saved on to a particular object called selected data. So if I say that I have my product ID, product name, and I select on a particular row, that row's selected product ID and product name is saved on to a particular object called selected data, and in my details grid I can set that value again. So I am setting the sys value back to product name and sys value back to category ID. So this way if I make a changes in my details grid, the changes are propagated back to the master grid. So you need not take care of the concept of again refreshing your master grid. So this kind of live binding is achieved using this binding syntax and by using this selected data. So this Microsoft AJAX library has greatly integrated with jQuery. So if I need to give a brief about jQuery, the jQuery was created by John Resin, and it was started as an open source product. It was mainly used as a plugin for DOM traversal, but this plugin is now converted into a complete library where you can do DOM manipulation, traversal, modification of DOM elements basically by using jQuery. It's cross-browser compatible. It's very fast. It's small download, about 15 KB in size, and it's used by major websites now. So your jQuery has lot good features. For example, the latest build of jQuery is 1.4.2. So in jQuery, basically, your jQuery is represented by your dollar symbol. Dollar means jQuery. Here I am creating a particular list item. So what I am doing is you are using $li, and within that you can see that all the attributes for that li is defined here at the same place. If you want to define a click function for your list item, if you want to give an ID to your list item, if you want to add a class for your list item, all this is done in a single syntax by using this new latest jQuery build. Then you have this various jQuery selectors. For example, if you want to go and select all the elements with the ID first name, then you can achieve by using $hash first name. Then you get the DOM nodes into your control, and you can add fresh methods onto this DOM nodes so that you can manipulate the DOM nodes according to your needs. Then if you have $text, then it selects all the text boxes for you, and then you can go and add certain functionality to all the text box. So in one place you can add that functionality and it will be reflected in all the text boxes. If you, for example, and you have this this common scenario where you have an input entry form and you have certain fields which are required. So if you need not go and add logic to each of the field or each of the input field that is required. So if you have a class called required set up on some text boxes, then you can add a common functionality saying that $.required. It selects all the elements on the screen which have this required class, and you can go and add functionality. Then this another common scenario where you have a grid, and if you want to add some functionality onto even rows. So I am selecting a particular grid or a temp or any other table, whatever it is, an element with an ID GRD. For that, it selects the even rows, and you can do certain functionality to this even rows. So this is the concept of jQuery selectors. Then jQuery has many animations. So you have this slide down animation or slide up animation. It basically animates the height of the object, where fade in and fade out, which animates the opacity of your object. We'll see all that in a demo. And we have the show and hide, which is similar to making the item visible or invisible. So there are a lot of animations, and you can give a lot of good user experience using this jQuery. Then you can bind certain custom events, and for example, you have a certain div element and you want to bind. By example, you want to define a certain delegate onto it. You can say dot bind, and instead of my plugin, it could be a click or a hover event or a mouse over event or anything possible, and some functionality to be called on that. So $div bind, give a name of the event and some functionality, or you could also trigger that particular event by using the trigger keyword. Then there is a big repository of jQuery plugins. So if you want to write your own plugin which you think is reusable, you can create this reusable methodology of jQuery and add it onto this site. So there are a lot of reusable plugins like this. Then you have this live and delegate concept. For example, if you have a table with various rows and you want certain functionality or a hover click or a click functionality to happen on some rows which are present in the grid, or some rows which are yet to be added to the grid. So you can add a delegate functionality such that even for the new rows which will be added to the grid, you can define a delegate or some functionality to happen on hover or certain click by using this live methodology of jQuery. Then similar to live is in jQuery 1.4 is the delegate functionality, which will do the same thing as live. Then we have lot of AJAX methods using jQuery, like jQuery AJAX, which starts up an AJAX HTTP request, or .AJAX complete, some handler to be called when your AJAX call is complete, or jQuery error, certain error message if you want to define. If a error comes, then you can define using the AJAX error handler methodology. Or if you on AJAX start, if a particular HTTP request is starting and you want to give a message that the HTTP request is starting, then you can add some functionality within the AJAX send methodology. Then you have like this various different built-in methods by use from jQuery which you can use for AJAX. We'll see that in the demo. Then you have this AJAX Control Toolkit, which includes 40 different controls, and it has a lot of server-side controls for all this. So all these controls are defined from client side as jQuery plugins. So all these controls have been defined as plugins to jQuery. So if you want to define these controls or use these controls in client side, then you have to use them using jQuery. So this is the handshake that we are talking about. If you download your AJAX Control Toolkit, you have your Microsoft AJAX library built into that. So you can get a download of that. Then you have your jQuery build also being downloaded using that. Then you have this client-side controls which are exposed using jQuery. So all this functionality is achieved in a single place. So now we are done with our slides. So let us go with the demos. So what I have here is my shopping cart application, where I have 3 tabs basically, browse categories, customer and welcome. So what you see here is a particular toolkit control called slide sorter control. So it's giving me a lot of images on the screen. So I have minimized the control so that it occupies less space. I have used another jQuery plugin on top of this slide sorter control called resizable control. Just observe me, I can resize the control to whatever I want on the screen. This would be a very good functionality if you could resize to a particular port on the screen, and then you could resize to whatever extent you want. So this resizable behavior is achieved by using another jQuery plugin called resize. So I am contacting a web service here, which is giving me all my images, and I have bound it onto a slide sorter control, which has this stop and play functionality also we can achieve. I can go to stop and go to the next slide or something. So, and within outside binding all this is my resizable control. Then down below I have my accordion control. So accordion, here I have my various categories being defined in an accordion control. So here I haven't defined all the products related to the category. If I want to define all the products related to a particular category, I am calling this get details, and you see that I have a loading label defined here. So if I click on get details, it contacts my web service and gets me all the products related to that particular category. And this is happening using jQuery AJAX. I showed in my previous slide that we have a jQuery AJAX functionality, where using this AJAX functionality, it's making a call to the web service and getting all the products related to a particular category. And this particular accordion control, I have put it within a draggable panel. So this draggable panel, I can drag to anywhere I want on the screen. So you can see the transparency which is achieved. This transparency, I really love it. This kind of look and feel, I don't know if we had ever achieved this. So this transparency is very good, and you can drag it to anywhere I want. So I've put this draggable jQuery plugin onto my accordion control. So in similar way, I can get all the details for my next category. So in this way, when I click on the get details, my loading went off and I got all the things. So all this is achieved using jQuery. Then if I have a customer screen, and if you want to watermark a particular text box, then I've achieved by using a jQuery plugin called watermark, where it's saying enter your name, and once I enter the name, it goes off. Then if you want to have a calendar plugin onto your text box, you can achieve that. If you want to get a color picker control, all these controls are present as server-side controls within your AJAX Control Toolkit, but they are also present as jQuery plugins. Since I am using them from client side, I am calling them as jQuery plugins. So I have my color picker control, we can go and click on a particular color. Then I have my filtered text box control, where it only accepts number, so I can go only number, or my rating control that I have. Then I have a collapsible panel control, where clicked on a particular terms and conditions, it gives me all the terms and conditions, and I can click back. This is the collapsible panel functionality. So in this way, there are, let me go back and show you the code that is used to achieve all this. So what I have done is I have this require functionality which I told, and I am getting only few of the JavaScript or the JavaScript AJAX components that I want. I was using the tabs component, so I have the extended tabs functionality. I have a div called tab container, which will act as a tab container, and within that I have various tab panels, and all the tab panels again are certain divs which are created for me. So, and I have a particular hyperlink called sign, and I want to add a model pop-up behavior onto this hyperlink. Then I have used a model pop-up plugin, and I am giving a div ID called pop-up, and a button click event called, and a button cancel event, and an OK and a cancel button that needs to be showed in the model pop-up. Then we saw an accordion control. So again, this accordion control is a div, and I am adding an accordion behavior onto this accordion grid. Then I have a div where we can add a slideshow behavior, which saw various images being displayed. So SS basically is an image, and it's acting as a slideshow where I am contacting a web service using a method called getImages, and I have a previous button, next button, play and stop button, using which I could give the slide sorter kind of behavior. So then you have this resizer div, which is on top of your slide sorter, and it's giving a resizable behavior onto your slide sorter. Then I have this accordion control, which is draggable by giving this draggable methodology or draggable behavior. So here is the lazy loading. I want the sys components called draggable JavaScript file, and I am asking it to load only the moment I am using it, not in page load. So where I require it, I am going and getting the script file. So even that can be achieved. So this was one grid that we saw. Then let me show you some AJAX functionality. You saw this get details link. So I had various category, and you had this get details link, and on click of that, you are using a $AJAX, and I am making a web service call based upon a particular parameter called category ID equals 1. And I need the data type to be returned as HTML. And on success of it, what I am doing is I had a span called, I had a text span, which was giving the loading image. And once the data is received, the loading image will fade in. I have added a fade in behavior or a fade in animation for that loading image to go off, and my product listing that I got is coming in place of that loading image. By using the span.html, the HTML of the span is changed back to the product listing that I got back. So if you need to see some of the other functionality, like, and I didn't show you the model pop-up, you can say I've signed in, or like that was the model pop-up behavior, or this new customer register, where I have this login screen which is given, and if you have a required kind of functionality that I showed in my jQuery selector, I can select all the text boxes which have this required box, and on blur of this you can add certain syntax to achieve this. Then another jQuery thing which will show is like all my fruit catalog. If I want to show, like I have this various listing of various fruit, and my favorite fruits I want to highlight in a certain color, and this is achieved by certain jQuery functionality, like so you select a particular, for example, you start off with a particular list item and select all the list items until a particular item, and then put a certain background style to that. So using that you can do. So there's very little time, I think, so I'll just move on with my demos. So I could get a certain subset of my list item and put a certain color. And on click of that, I had a bind event for clicks, that is, on click of this, I said if I want to get the index of the pear fruit, I could get it. Then we had this span, like on blur of this particular text image, if I type in something, that there's an animation which happens and the text displayed next to it will blur off. That is by using the fade in animation, and I have put a delay also saying that after a certain delay, a fade in should happen of that span text. And on mouse over, then I have put a binding, say that if I mouse over this selected thing, I need a certain animation to happen on mouse over and mouse out. So certain animation is happening. So if I have some admin task that we'll say, I didn't explain about the save data that we had. So this is basically the same live binding that we had, which I showed you. But here if I can make certain changes and save all the changes to the database. How this is achieved is like you have a data context being defined, and here data context is set up on a shopping service with a save changes web method. So here along with my onload functionality, I have a button click here which has the product service.datacontext.save changes. So it's same as your submit changes on the server side. You have your data being exposed on the web, and you could go to the nitty-gritties of a particular table up to the row of a particular table and see all that using a particular URL. This is the REST-based concept of data service. I'll show you in my sample that if you don't use the ADO.NET data, if you use this data context called ADO.NET data context, you did not specify the web method which is doing the save operation also. All this is automatically done using your ADO. Another thing which you can achieve using data services is, once you get the categories data, you can expand and get all the products related to a particular category. You need not write any extra coding for that. So I'll show you a demo of this, how this ADO.NET data service works. I think I'm time up, so we'll just do the last demo. So I have my ADO.NET data context. I think it's not working for certain. Okay, know which technology you're using. You just need your AJAX library and your HTML pages. I'm using Visual Studio here just as a editor. You can just work with your HTML and AJAX library, download the latest AJAX Control Toolkit also. So if you download the toolkit, as I told you, you get your AJAX library, your jQuery, all your toolkit controls in one place. So I'd encourage all of you to go, and here if you have any doubts, you could contact me on chaitra.nagaraj@gmail.com. So thanks for listening to me.